Coming out of the conference, I understood that buyers are, we used to say that buyers were about 60 or 70% through the buying cycle or the selling cycle, the cycle before they wanted to engage with a sales rep. That's getting closer and closer to 90. Right. So, I mean, they're going to come on that, buyers are now going to come in only just needing to maybe haggle for a price at the end. Like, the selling job is going to change so dramatically. And again, the sales leadership role is going to change so dramatically. And I knew I was starting to see things earlier this year, which is why I kind of threw myself into some conferences to see if I was crazy.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Kristie Jones. She's been in the industry for about 9 years and is the founder of Sales Acceleration Group. Welcome to the podcast, Kristie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, let's start at the origin story, the lore. Tell me how you got into coaching and more importantly, how you started your business.
Yes, I don't have maybe I do have the typical story, but I was laid off from my company during a restructuring. So I went out to find my next W-2 sales leadership role. I had been a SaaS B2B sales leader for quite some time, 20-ish years, when I got reorged out. And at that point, really just through networking, I was truly, like I said, looking for my next sales leadership role. And then I said the universe conspired to push me in the direction that I live today. A bunch of things happened within the 3-month period of time when I was being reorged out. So the company had asked me if I would stay on for 3 months while they were transitioning during the reorganization. If I stayed on for 3 months, they were going to pay me 3 months severance. So I said yes to that. And during that 90-day period of time, as I was networking, I had a lot of connections in the VC world, a lot of people I had worked with in the past. So I was reaching out to everyone. And it all started with a general manager at a VC reached out to me and said, hey, we've just invested in a cybersecurity company, and that founder needs to move from founder-led selling to building out their first sales team and doesn't know what to do. Do you think you could have coffee with him? And I said, of course. One of my mantras is I have 30 minutes for everyone. So I believe in the world will take care of me if I, do the right things will happen. And I believe that helping others is the right thing to do. And so I met with Brian. And over 90 minutes, he took a bunch of notes in his notebook. And as we were walking out of Starbucks, he said, this was amazing. But I don't believe that I'm qualified to do almost anything you told me is going to need to be done. Do you know someone who can help me? And without hesitation, I said, I can. And so while I was still trying to figure out the rest of my life, I took on his project, and he ultimately became client number 1 of my consulting business that did not exist at the time.
That's so crazy. At a Starbucks too. That's so funny. You wouldn't expect that normally.
Everybody loves a good Starbucks story.
Yeah. And you said that was 9 years ago, right?
Yeah, 2016, March of 2016, all of that happened.
Yeah, so that's quite a long time. That's almost a decade. And so if we fast forward to today, who do you help today? Like, what is the target market kind of the same type of avatar?
It really is. That was one of the things for the coaches that are listening today. That was one of the things I really had to, get comfortable with and wrap my head around, because I had been a sales coach and a sales trainer. I had been an executive at a lot of companies. I'd been sort of living in the startup world. So I kind of gravitated towards the startup world, but I truly felt like I had a lot of skills I could bring to the table. But when you at that time, if you go back 10 years and looked at my LinkedIn profile, it would have sounded like every other sales consultant or sales coach out there, right? And somebody really challenged me one time. It was around pandemic, and I'd reached out to a LinkedIn expert who was in my network, and I said, hey, no better time than to refresh my LinkedIn profile while we've got some time on our hands. And so as she and I were working together, she kept challenging me. I can't remember how many characters, but at the time there were fewer characters that you could put in your little LinkedIn profile, in your profile 1-sentence or 2-sentence area. And she kept challenging me. And she said, I don't know why you're hesitating talking about helping startup founders. And I said, well, that just seems like it's really limiting me. And she said, I know, but it's also what makes you different, because it's very niche. And so really from that point forward, I sort of embraced it. I was already doing it, and I was getting a lot of business from VCs, but now I call it go small to get big. So, I really basically now I say I really truly work with startup founders that are in the 1 to 5 million range because that really is my sweet spot. And the minute I got really specific about my, ICP, my ideal customer profile, then people knew exactly who to refer me to and who to introduce me to. And so, I would say I got more and more, during that period of time. I did some, I do some service companies, but I did some not, I did some B2C as opposed to B2B. I did some, manufacturing. I did some other things. And then once I really, I really had to get comfortable and trust that, if I said this truly is my swim lane and my sweet spot, that would resonate with people, and the right people would show up and the right people have.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about this ICP too. Like, have you noticed any common themes or problems that these like startup founders struggle with, I guess?
Yeah, and that's the good news. They all have the same problems. So, so it's very easy for me. I used to do, used to say I would do like 2 to 3 discovery calls to try to make sure I fully understood the problems. But as the more I did it, the more the problems were all same and similar. Everyone has a top of the funnel problem. No one has enough deals in their pipeline. No one has any processes documented or formalized. No one knows how to interview and separate what I call the posers from the players. Salespeople are professional interviewees, buyer beware. And so founders know how to hire developers. They don't know how to hire sales professionals. Again, I think the number one problem that I run across, and this is probably across more than just the sales function, but lack of discipline. When you're an early stage startup founder, some money's better than no money. But at some point, once you get to that $1 million mark, you really have to start saying no to people who don't fit your ICP. It's a distraction. Those people are PETA customers, as I affectionately call them, pain in the ass customers. They take more time, they suck the energy, they distract your dev team, right? Because the product is never right for those people, right? If they're not your ideal customer and they don't fit your use case, then they're going to want you to do something special for them, which takes away dev's time from improving the product. Now all of a sudden you've got 7 different versions of the product for 7 different customers that you should have never sold to. So it's a lot of things that they have in common.
Man, I love how you shared your personal journey about like how you had to jump on 3 discovery calls to figure out the actual problems for these people. But as you narrow down your niche, it's really, really interesting how these common problems that you mentioned are recurring themes and all that. And so now that we kind of know who you kind of help and the problems that they have, let's talk about the marketing for a second. And so I think you said you're on LinkedIn, but what kind of marketing are you doing right now? How do people in general find out about you?
I do a few things. One, I've outsourced my marketing to a company where that founder is currently living in Thailand. When I met her, she was living in Argentina, and then she moved to Spain, so she's a nomad. But we meet weekly. But for the beginning of my coaching and consulting business, I was trying to write 1 blog post a week, and I was trying to post on LinkedIn as often as I could about things that I thought were relevant. But I've gotten to the point in my business where I've outsourced that. So she and I meet every week for an hour. I use stories from my current clients. I tell her what I'm hearing. I just got back from a conference in DC where I'm going to dump all that on her on Wednesday and tell her all of the things that I learned so we can build some posts around that. I actually met with her while I was in the middle of that conference, but I've got more information now. And so I think it's very important. So a couple of interesting things. One, I mean, LinkedIn, just like most of these type of platforms, are very algorithm driven. And so you have to know how to play the algorithm game and want to play the algorithm game, which is why I've outsourced it to somebody else, because I don't want to spend time learning LinkedIn's algorithm. I just want to talk about things that I'm passionate about or that I think are important to my audience. And so we now post 5 days a week. We post Monday through Friday. I do a newsletter. I drop a LinkedIn newsletter on Wednesday, and I have a database of 9,000 people in my HubSpot instance. So we also email that newsletter out on Wednesday mornings as well. One of the things that I spend a lot of time doing, and I've just come back from one and I'm leaving for one tomorrow morning. I speak at startup weeks all over the country. So I was in Vegas 2 weeks ago speaking at that startup week. I'm headed to Reno tomorrow to speak at that startup week. I'm speaking at a conference in early October. So my audience is startup founders. And so most major cities have a startup week. And so I do travel all over the country to startup weeks. I've spoken in DC, I've spoken in Raleigh, Durham. I speak here locally in St. Louis, tech weeks as well. So I find a lot of, I find good prospects in that arena because, I mean, I always say if you can afford it, conferences are always a very good lead source because it's your people all in one room who are, people who are trying to get educated. They're lifelong learners. They're people who want to, want to be at the forefront of trends. And so I've always said that conferences are good. They're not always affordable for some of my clients. But, again, in these kind of startup weeks, we're not looking at a 10 by 10 booth. We're not looking at major expenses. I'm going to fly in tomorrow morning. I'm speaking tomorrow afternoon, and I'm staying for the morning on Wednesday to hear some other people's sessions before I fly back out. I did the same thing in Vegas. So, I do a lot of things to market. I wrote a book, which actually isn't for startup founders. It's actually for sales professionals. So I wrote a book last year that got published in August called Selling Your Way In, the playbook for setting your income and owning your life. One of the reasons why I started helping my clients hire sales professionals, it was not one of the services that I originally offered, but I saw people mishiring sales professionals thinking that they were hunters when they were really farmers or gatherers, not hiring someone someone who came from a big logo, but big logo people are normally not good startup fit candidates. But on the flip side, I also saw candidates who were applying for jobs that did not fit their trait set, as I call it. They did not truly understand what their superpowers and secret weapons were, or what type of sales role they should be getting in order to get to the top 10%. And so I wrote a book for those individuals last year.
I love it. You have the whole spectrum, and it sounds like, I love one thing I like about you is like you tell the whole story. You told me that you started off trying to do your own posts, really struggled with it, so you outsourced it, then came speaking, and then you had your book, and then you kind of shifted the things that you offered based on the problems that you saw in the market too. I love that. It's really interesting.
I was just there a couple weeks ago at Startup Week.
Yeah. Okay, so people are finding out about you. Let's talk about them actually working with you. When someone does maybe a coach, let's focus on the coaching aspect of your business. When people want to do a coaching engagement with you, what does that look like? Is that like a one-on-one coaching, group coaching, organizational training? Kind of curious about your offers.
Yeah. For the I normally just do executive coaching. Like I said, there are sales trainers out there. I'm not certified in Medic or some of the other certifications that are out there, some of the other sales methodologies that are out there. I believe in certain sales methodologies, but I don't train on those. So I'm not a group trainer, sales trainer. There are plenty of people out there, and I'm happy to point you in a direction if you need one. I got lots of people in my network who are sales trainers. I really prefer to do executive coaching. So I do it normally. It's normally two different types of people. Normally it's a founder. It's a startup B2B founder who's not ready to hire their first sales rep yet, who's still playing sales rep, if you will, but needs somebody to come in as the sales leader. Right. So, we're doing weekly one-on-ones, we're doing pipeline review meetings, we're doing deal strategy sessions. So I'm truly just playing their leader for them in order to help them get a little bit further down the revenue path before maybe they can get some funding from a third party. And then the other person that tends to seek me out and ask is a new sales leader, someone who has not been a sales leader before. We in the B2B SaaS world love to promote the top sales rep into sales leader. And they have had no prior experience doing so. This is not something that I advocate, but it's something that happens all the time. And so a lot of people, ironically, hear me on podcasts and reach out to me. I have a particular affinity for females who have been promoted from sales leader to sales or sales rep to sales leader. A lot of women reach out to me. I think it's because they sense the female factor here, and there's not that many of them out there in the B2B SaaS world. So a lot of first-time sales leaders I'm doing some executive coaching with. So, I do, I call it we do the therapy session once a week for an hour. I like to do at least 3 months. So we'll sit down together and we'll understand the competencies that are already sort of in place and then ones that aren't. A lot of times they don't understand things about creating an accountability culture. What are the consequences for what I call bad behavior? So how do we handle reps that are missing quota, that aren't doing the activities that are needed? A lot of them have not been given good sales coaching or training themselves. Some of them are self-taught. They did not come up in an environment. So I believe in the art of sales. We are flooded right now with the science of sales. There's a data set for everything right now. There's AI, there's automation, there's data, but we're losing, I think the art of sales is becoming extinct. And so helping them figure out how to teach the art of sales skills that are necessary when they're not only hiring new reps, but also trying to get B players to A players or C players to B players, that type of thing. So those are really the two big executive coaching areas that I spend my time in.
Sounds like the work you do is pretty intimate, by the way. So how do you manage your client capacity and all that?
Yeah, good question. I know what I can take on right now. Five's the magic number. Nothing over 5. That breaks the model. But it really depends on how many people I'm currently hiring for. Because while I'm doing a hiring project, it's about 3 or 4 weeks of super intense and very time consuming. So I have 1099s that review resumes and do phone screens. But normally, once we get past the phone screen stage and we involve the client, we actually project manage the hiring process from start to finish. So the client is never left alone with the candidate. So unlike a staffing company where they just, go through a bunch of resumes and send you 10 that they think are qualified based on their vetting, we actually never leave your side. So we're with you every step of the way, including we do the offer. We stick around for the first 2 weeks of onboarding. So those are very intensive projects. So I can't take on any more than 2 of those at a time. But I can do a lot of executive coaching projects because it's an hour or 2 per person per week. And so I can handle a lot of those. The sales playbook projects and putting together all the sales processes, formalizing them. I can handle a lot of those as well. I can handle 2 or 3 of those at a time because those are only 1 to 2 hours a week of work. And thanks to AI, things have I've made my life a little bit simpler in using AI myself to be more efficient. So what I love most, Kevin, is a little blend, right? I love a couple of playbook clients. I like to help people hire, and then I like a couple of executive coaching clients all at one. I have just enough ADD in me that I like a little variety in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, because, even from my experience too, like working with some of these like sales placement agencies and stuff like that, they just like plop you 10 candidates and half of them are trash, by the way.
Right.
And I'm just like, oh my God, like, dude, your standards and my standards are totally different. And they just peace out. It's so frustrating. So it's
Yeah,
really,
we actually charge less than we charge less than staffing companies who normally charge about 30% of base salary. We charge less than that and offer a whole lot more.
I have so many questions there, but that's probably for a different podcast.
Okay. We can do a hiring only podcast.
Yeah. The other thing I'm very curious about too is like one of the things that a lot of people struggle with listening to this is pricing strategy as well. And so you being a salesperson, sales expert, of course you don't need to give any hard numbers, but I'm very curious your thoughts on pricing strategies, especially with the executive coaching part. I know some coaches, they charge hourly, some do project based, some do value based, some do retainers and stuff.
Mhm.
Where have you kind of gravitated to, I guess?
Yeah, I was grateful and privileged to have a mentor when I first started. I fell into a situation where I was doing a fractional sales leadership role, and I was working my way into someone who was working their way out. He was deciding no longer to do sales consulting and coaching in that way. And so, but as we were overlapping, he took me on as a project, if you will, and I became his mentee. And one of the first things he said to me is, do not charge hourly. Nobody likes lawyers, nobody likes accountants, and nobody likes the hourly charge. And he said, plus, like, what are you going to do when they call you on a Friday night, for 15 minutes or a quick 7-minute question? Like, how are you going to charge for that? He goes, people get really disagreeable when they get that bill, the invoice, when it has listed all of the 7-minute calls that you've had, that they rounded up to 30 minutes. And he said, you just don't want to do it. So I do project based for most of it and retainers for some of it. So if I'm doing the sales process playbook build out, that's a project, and I charge a set fee, half up front before we get started and half when I deliver the product, right? When I deliver the final playbook. For hiring, it's the same situation. It's a set fee. The fees are based on the type of individual I'm hiring. The more, if I'm hiring an enterprise AE with a $1.5 million quota, much different than hiring an SDR who needs to get 10 appointments a month. So, but same concept, half up front before we drop the job description and half when the offer letter is signed. So I hold myself accountable. So again, the quicker we do these things, quicker I get my second half of the money. As far as the executive coaching is concerned, I do a monthly retainer. So what I say is, this is the price per month, and I need a 3-month minimum because I don't think I can make any impact with anybody in under 3 months. And then as part of that, we decide how many times a week we're going to be meeting. It's normally 1, sometimes it's 2. But then I say, as part of that package, and actually as part of all of my packages, they have full access to me at any time, or anybody on my team that they need access to, about anything. So whether it has to do with hiring or not, whether it has to do with building out a sales playbook or not, if you have a question and it's sales related that you think, as an expert, I can help you with, you get full access to me through email, text, phone, whatever you need, Slack. I'm on a lot of people's Slack channels. So as part of that, you can call me outside of our scheduled therapy sessions, and ask me anything you want.
And I'm not sure if you can share this, but do you tend to price the client like based off how big the organization is, or do you do set rates for everything?
In most cases, it's set rates. For executive coaching, it doesn't matter whether you're a founder who needs executive coaching or a brand new sales leader. I think the value is the same and the time commitment's the same. That normally ranges around, and I don't charge a ton for it. It normally ranges around $2,000 a month. And we do, if that's for 4 sessions and any time that you need me outside of that. If we need to meet more frequently, then the price will go up from there.
Ah, I see. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I've just been so curious because, I'm also in sales. I've been head of sales for a lot of YouTubers and stuff like that too. And, as I'm like reading different books, some people say you should charge value based and stuff, and you should always price the client. And so I'm very curious about how different like sales experts in the industry think about it. But it's really interesting how you think about it as well.
Yeah, I'm part of a group called Women Sales Experts. We're female sales consultants. There's 35 of us across the US. And I know the answer to a lot of these questions because we do an annual pricing survey. So I know what
Yeah.
people are charging for things. And for the most part, no one's charging hourly.
Mm.
I'll only charge hourly if a former client calls me and says, "Hey, can you do a final interview with a candidate?" Or, like, "Hey, the executive team wants to bat an idea around. Can you spare an hour for us?" I'll charge hourly at that point. But in general, I prefer not to do that. And I'll do it on one-off cases like that. But most people are not doing value-based pricing either. I think one of the reasons is value is subjective, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. I think I add a lot of value. I think my clients would agree. But putting a price on that seems sort of like the Visa commercial. Things are, priceless, right? So how do you convince somebody that this is the price you should be paying for the value you're going to receive when you don't know yet? How many new clients might you get once you put a formal playbook together and I teach you the secret sauce of making sure you've got enough pipeline in order to close deals?
Sales podcast, but one of the things I'm also curious about is you're coming up upon almost a decade in your business. And so I'm curious about your future goals. Like, where do you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have any secret dreams, ambitions no one knows about, desires to scale? I'd love to hear.
Yep, good question. I'm actually thinking maybe the opposite. I'm starting to think about getting out. I think it's, I just came back from this conference that I mentioned, and one of the breakout sessions was a room full of coaches and consultants. And there were probably, I don't know, 70 of us in the room. And I think the space is getting crowded. And here's the reason why. The white collar recession is real. And a lot of people are losing their jobs and they're having trouble finding a job. So it's taking the average sales. So in my world, I'll just give you my stats. In the average B2B SaaS world, if you lose your job, it's taking an average of 27 weeks for you to find your next role. Sales leaders, the median amount of time a sales leader, so like a CRO, a chief revenue officer, VP of sales is staying in their role is 12 to 15 months, right? And so a lot of people who've lost their job and are struggling to find a new one are getting into our business, right? They're getting into the coaching and consulting business. I met a guy at the conference, sat next to me as we were at a session together, and that was his situation. And there were a lot of people in the room that was their situation. And so I think the space is going to get really crowded. I think that AI is going to dramatically change things to the point where there will be more white collar workers out of work than ever before. And so I'm really trying to decide, I'm either going to lean in. To be honest with you, I'm either going to lean in. So I think, as an example, I think the playbook business that I have, that service is going to be out of business in 2 years. I think AI will be able to do that. The question is, should I be building an AI agent to help my startup founders build their own playbook? So either I'm going to have to lean way in and say, I'm going to take Lovable and I'm going to build out an app, a playbook app for B2B startup founders around $1 million in revenue. And I'm going to build it out. So all you have to do is I'm going to ask you all these questions. You're going to answer all these questions. And then the playbook will be developed for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to need to actually potentially double down on the hiring help part of my services because there are going to be more people out of work than ever before that are going to be qualified for the job, so to speak. And I think you're going to get down to where you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have 7 qualified candidates, but I only have budget for 1 or 2. And I think that's where my expertise and my team's expertise will come in. You're going to have more A players, if you will, who are going to be available to you, but you still only have budget for X. And so I think it makes sense for me to maybe lean into that a little bit more. And then, I've had a lot of people approach me about doing individual coaching.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, I don't have any outside of the executive coaching. I mean, individuals for people who are out of work, like, would you coach someone who's out of work to try to find a job? It feels like a couple of things, like morally, I feel a little bit bad about asking people to spend money when I know they don't have it. And then in general, I don't know that I'm the best person to do that.
Yeah.
And so I have been doing some webinars for those who are out of work. I have been giving some advice about what your resume should look like, how to get some attention. More and more, again, resumes are being run through automation, AI. And so there's certain things that need to show up on your resume. But in general, I don't think, I'm not a life coach in that way. I'm not a work coach, find your next job role coach in that way. But I'm seeing the future. I'm attending a lot of conferences this year so I can get ahead of the trends. But I think it's going to become a more saturated industry, coaching and consulting. And I'm sort of, even though I have a very specific niche, I think a lot of the people that I work for, again, are coders and developers. Founders are technical founders, right? They built their product out. I think they'll be very quick and early adopters to AI, not only AI native, making AI native products, but I
Mhm.
think they're also going to be using, vibe coding and other things, and even their own staff to be able to build out things that they don't have today. I still think one of the advantages of working with me in those type of situations is if you don't know the right questions to ask, the playbook may be incomplete because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know
Yeah.
all of the processes and things that need to be put into place. But I think, like right now, as an example, there's a 10% unemployment rate for recruiters. So that seems to be the first industry that's really getting pummeled. But I am asking a lot of questions, meeting with a lot of people right now. I'm trying to meet with anybody who will have this discussion with me because I think that and I'm getting ready to speak at my own conference. So the Women Sales Experts group, I'm speaking on this topic in 2 weeks in Chicago when the group comes together, which is, based on how quickly the world's changing. Are you pivoting your business? Are you going to iterate? Are you going to pivot? Are you going to get out? What are you going to do? If you're worried about keeping up.
As you're going through this transition right now, what are some challenges that you're noticing, right? Like, because it seems like there's a dilemma right now. You either lean in or lean out. And
Mhm.
what's kind of going through your mind during this season of business?
Whether or not I want to change my business in a way that the thing I love most about my business is the human one-on-one interaction that I get with people is, coming in and facilitating, the workshop in order to make sure we get the best playbook out of it. I love that human interaction. I don't know that I'm going to enjoy, using Lovable to build out an app to help other people build playbooks that don't involve a human. I don't know that I'm going to get good set. I don't know that that'll be satisfying for me. It may provide some recurring revenue, right? It may give me some ARR that I don't have today because nothing I do is a recurring revenue model, except for the executive coaching, and that it always doesn't last a year. But I just don't know that I'm going to get that will fill my cup. I've, got a large amount of passion for what I do. People who I work with are so grateful. I have expertise and information and, skills in areas that others don't. And so I just don't know that I will enjoy doing it the way that it might need to be done in the future. I also think it's going to get more and more complicated. I mean, I just did a demo this morning with a company who does automated demos. I think for a current client that I'm working for in Buffalo, I think this is the perfect product. I met them at the conference last week. And so when you think about even things like this, like right now, and the sales rep was great. He said, now this doesn't replace your live demos. We still expect you to be doing live demos, but we're letting you build, let's say, a template of demos that are 5 minutes, right? Like just this feature, just this functionality, just this component, just this dashboard, and being able to automatically send those out through your CRM system or through email. I hear him now, but I'm not so sure that in the future isn't automated demos where you don't even have a human prospect, the buyer doesn't even have a human on the other side. I just don't know that that's going to be enjoyable for me.
Yeah. The concept of automated demos wasn't even a thing like 5 years ago. No one would, it was barely a thought. It was kind of like how we thought Terminator or like things like Terminator and Skynet. Like when it came out in the 90s, it wouldn't be a thing of the future, but it's looking very, very likely.
And it's
So,
it's already here. I mean,
yeah.
coming out of the conference, I understood that buyers are, we used to say that buyers were about 60 or 70% through the buying cycle or the selling cycle, the cycle before they wanted to engage with a sales rep. That's getting closer and closer to 90. right? So, I mean, they're going to come on, buyers are now going to come in only just needing to maybe haggle for a price at the end. Like, the selling job is going to change so dramatically. And again, the sales leadership role is going to change so dramatically. And I knew I was starting to see things earlier this year, which is why I kind of threw myself into some conferences to see if I was crazy or if I was onto something. And it's very clear. Mark Menioff, who is the CEO of Salesforce, one of the breakout sessions I was in, they used a quote from him that said, "This generation, we are the last generation that will ever manage just humans. Every generation forward will manage a combination of humans and agents. And I wonder how long it'll be before we're just managing agents and or at that point, not needing humans to even manage agents." Right? So, I mean, I read an article yesterday about a company who the CEO by the end of the year has hired like a chief, like automation officer, if you will, and has said by the end of the year, he wants 40% of his staff to be agents. So where does that leave consultants and coaches if your swim lane is not agent centric, AI native, and you're going to have to be wired for that, right? Like, I think a good coaching business, by the way, that I'm not qualified to do. I read SaaStr is a very, Jason Lemkin is a influencer in our industry, and he runs a company called SaaStr. And he's talking about the burnout that's coming because we've gone from work-life balance being a concept to who gives a shit about work-life balance. If you are going to survive in this AI native world with your product, developers are now working 6 days a week, 80 hours a week. And CTOs and CEOs are saying, and we don't really care about your personal life. Like, either, this is going to be the most exciting time in software this next 2-year period. So either come along for the ride and be a part of some of the frontier, be a pioneer in the frontier, or go find something else to do. And so if you were a life coach or perhaps you were someone who took people through psychedelic journeys or whatever, but I think it's very clear. He had a whole article on the concern about the burnout factor of these individuals who are now going to be working at a pace and they still may not win, meaning they still may not get their product to market or the AI native piece of the product that needs to go to market before their competitors. And then what will the fallout be from people who fail, companies that go under because they weren't first to market with their product or they didn't provide the best AI native type product? So I think there is going to be a place for those type of coaches potentially where people are lost, right? They've gotten divorced, their kids don't have a relationship with their children right now, those type of things. And there's plenty of money. We're paying developers in that situation more than we've ever paid them before. But I think that's how fast the world is changing. And so, if you're a coach and consultant right now, I think you should be absolutely asking yourself, what should I be doing differently in the next 6 months? Because that's how quickly I think things are going to happen.
Do you feel like there's a silver lining to this? I know it seems very like doom and gloom with sales
Yep.
Skynet, like the guy hiring 40% of agents to replace.
Yep.
But do you see any silver lining?
I'm not yet seeing a silver lining, and I would like to lean into what you've said and try to find some sort of positivity. I think everybody's scared. I mean, I think the room that I was in with full of consultants and coaches, everybody seemed nervous. I think the people who are, again, if you're open to change. So I think the silver lining is I think there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of people to be helping if you lean into the new X, right? Whatever that might be in your world and your industry, but truly understanding that no matter what industry you're in and no matter what coaching business you have, AI is going to change things. I'm coming out of this conference working on building my digital twin so that I have somebody to debate with, right? And so how will AI impact? I heard a really scary story the other day, and I'm sure you heard it too, of a teenager that used ChatGPT, right, as a therapist who was not qualified to do so. I think there are going to be some of those stories. So, but I think if you can, I'm trying to figure out what the world's going to look like when all of these white collar workers are out of work. What sort of coaching or consulting might we need? What sort of business maybe could I start that I'm not even thinking about today that could help those type of individuals? I think a lot of those people are going to try entrepreneurship. And so, maybe if you're an entrepreneurial coach, this is definitely a silver lining for you. But I think more than anything, the world feels very uncertain right now. And so I do think, by the way, there will be a clearing, right? Like this feels very much like the tech bubble, right? Where everybody thought, every company out there was going to be a unicorn and everybody was going to get an IPO and everybody was just going to get their private island and their yacht and their private chef. I think there's a lot of that feeling in here. But I think if you look at, let's not repeat the past by understanding it. I think, there were a lot of people that didn't make it. And in general, a lot of new companies don't make it, right? A lot of companies don't make it to the 5-year mark. I think a lot of companies aren't going to make it to the 2-year mark. But I think if your entrepreneurial mindset is in place and you have an entrepreneurial spirit, I think this is probably the best time in the last, 10 to 20 years for you. If you're somebody who loves learning new things, who embraces change, this is your time. Jump in with both feet.
I was going to ask these questions in a different order, but since we're on this topic, given all the AI stuff going on and you were to start like a coaching business now, and let's say you had a gun to your head, you had to do a coaching business with all the AI stuff, what would your first 90 days kind of look like if you had to build a coaching business today? I
would be reaching out to your network, right? I mean, that's where I started. I think that's where all the best coaches and consultants start, is reaching out to their network and figuring out where, like, even with the concept of just AI, like, what does that mean for your company? What does that mean for you personally? What are the things that you're worried about? Even though AI is now embedded in every company, most people are not using it efficiently. It's not getting up and running, but I would be doing, like, I'll go old school on you. I would be doing focus groups, right? By putting people together. I mean, and that's why I went to this conference. It was, it was 700, it was a big 700 person focus group. Right. For me, I was asking a ton of questions. I was trying to get the pulse of people. I sat in on a couple of sessions where it was like, this demo is going to be more important. Again, people aren't going to want to go through a discovery call anymore because they will have already done that work with AI. They will know everything about you and your company before you ever say hi to them. And so a lot of the speakers that I was talking to and sessions I was sitting in on were talking about, demo first, which is like an old school bad practice, right? We used to say like stop pimping. I would say stop pimping the demo. Have a conversation with people, get to know them, figure out what's going on with them so that you can customize your demo. But now what we're starting to hear is people don't want to do that. They just want to know, can your product fix my problem? So I would just say, like, talk to everybody, right? Talk to people who've been in the coaching business, talk to people who not in the coaching business, talk to people who've used coaches in the past. Ask them, like, where do you think going forward a coach might fit into your, infrastructure in the company? Where might you, at what point, for what things might you hire a coach for? For what things do you think AI can do it instead of a coach for you? So, I mean, I would just be asking, I would be like a voracious learner right now.
A lot to think about right now, especially with the AI stuff going. And no, it's kind of crazy. A lot of the things that you're saying, a lot of my peers, a lot of the things I've been personally thinking as well. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's change up the mood and then we'll close out the podcast. Awesome. I'd love to play a game with you if you're open to it.
I'm very competitive.
It's not one of those games. It's one of those storytelling games.
Okay. I was like, I like a good game. I'm very competitive.
So, a lot of coaches, and entrepreneurs, they invest in things. They invest into things like coaching, training, marketing, team members, a lot of different things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to prompt a short phrase, and I want the first thing that comes up to mind. You can just mention the first thing, okay? And I'll ask you a question at the very end. First business investment you remember?
Was the marketing. It was outsourcing my marketing.
Okay, interesting. Last business investment you made?
Publishing my book. Big financial investment there. Publishing a book is not cheap.
Some of the investments that were required to publish a book?
Well, first and foremost, the publisher requires you to buy X number of copies of your book. I think I spent $25,000 to $30,000 publishing my book. The first investment of the book was hiring a book coach. So as a coach myself, I'm a coach junkie. So I got a coach for, if I've not done it before, I think it's inefficient for me to try to figure it out. So I hired a woman to meet with me every week, to hold me accountable, to give me homework. And she held my hand through the entire writing process, which people thought was interesting because I have a journalism degree, and writing is my thing. I'm a very good writer, but I needed to be held accountable because, again, I was trying to do this and run my business simultaneously, which made it very challenging. So the very first investment was in a human to coach me and hold me accountable. I then spent money with the publisher. I spent money with an IP lawyer who reviewed that contract. I had to invest in, I didn't have an IP lawyer at the time. Marketing, I had a marketing company at the time. I changed my marketing company. I let them go and hired a company that I thought was better suited to help promote the book. I invest in, even the startup weeks that I go to, I 75 books to Vegas and I've sent 75 books to Reno that I'm giving away.
Mhm.
Those are investments. Those are still book tour investments, if you will. But there was a lot of money invested in the book. I hired a graphic designer to make the cover. I didn't like the publisher's cover, so I hired a graphic designer to do that. Along with the book, I created Christieism cards with the same graphic designer. There's a lot of, it's like a deck of cards with Christieisms on the back. And so I created these. I have a chapter in the book of all my Christieisms. So I created playing cards for the book launch as well. So writing a book is not free. And the goal is just to break even, right? Most people who write a book don't make money from it. In the way I call it getting paid on the back end. So to your point, speaking engagements that come from the book, those type of things help cover the cost of the book.
Best business investment you made?
Hiring the book coach, probably, for sure. Hiring a coach and hiring experts. My best business investments are hiring experts who know more than I do about whatever topic. Investing in myself in that way.
Worst investment you made that you kind of want your money back from?
I kind of want my money back from the book thing a little bit. It's a lot of money. I don't know that I didn't want to self-publish because, again, I'm not an expert in publishing, but it wasn't the experience that I hoped it was. And I think it was a lot of money for probably not as much return as I'd hoped for.
What were you hoping to get from the book? What were the initial reasons why you wrote the book?
Yeah, good question. I was hoping to get 5 to 8 speaking engagements a year. And I think I pushed really hard at that initially. And I did get a couple of speaking engagements. But really, I think, I have a couple of women in my women's sales experts group who are professional speakers. This is what they do all the time. It's a very different business model. It requires a very different level of commitment. I wasn't really willing to walk away from my startup world in order to just go 100% into the speaking business. But the whole goal was to what I call get paid on the back end. So to get new clients that had never heard of me before, and to get speaking engagements. I love speaking. I would love to speak more and work less, but I don't think that was I don't know that that was a realistic expectation. I think for some people it is. I don't know that I wrote a book because I wrote a book for individual contributors, individual sales professionals. I don't know that that type of book gets you the kind of speaking engagements that I was hoping for. I do a keynote that came out of the book on identifying and leveraging your superpowers to be able to own your life and unleash your possibilities. And so that keynote that came out of the book seems to be one that gets the most traction, particularly with sales teams and, sales kickoff meetings, those type of things. Because a lot of the book talks about finding the right sales role. So if you're a sales leader, you probably don't want to bring me in to talk about that because it might not be your sales role that's the right sales role for people in the room. But leveraging and identifying your sales superpower or your superpowers in order to see how far you can get, i.e., ideally you'd get to the top 10% but leveraging part of your superpowers understands what roles you should be taking and how to leverage your superpowers. I think the book, I have no regrets. I hear from people all the time randomly on LinkedIn that reach out to me and said, I read your book and I quit my job and found a new one as a result. That is why I wrote it. I thought there were a lot of people who were in the wrong job role. And I wanted you to find something that you would love getting up and doing every day and that you could help you get to the top of your profession financially and recognition-wise, emotionally.
Yeah. And on that note, Kristie, how can people find you and connect with you?
Yep. LinkedIn's the best way. I'm under Kristie, the letter K. My initial starts with K, Jones. I'm also at KristieKJones.com. If you're interested in learning more about the book, sellingyourwayin.com. But probably the easiest way and the way that people find me the fastest is on LinkedIn.
Wow, Kristie, this was definitely a very interesting podcast because it's not every day that I get to interact with another sales individual and stuff or a sales expert. And so it was really refreshing hearing your take on the role of AI in the future and just everything that you've done. You've built out a really solid marketing pipeline and stuff too. Just really interesting hearing your background coming from the SaaS world. So I appreciate you sharing all your experience and all your investments on this podcast. So thank you so much, Kristie, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I wish the best for all of your listeners. And if I can be of help, please reach out.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.